all the school staff. Tomorrow, for example, we will speak about professional learning communities. And I persuade that the community in the school stands and falls on ethical basis. In other words, the extent of the virtues are present in the community. Only virtue readers can be successful in school culture change. Yesterday, during the dinner, we were speaking with Juan Pablo, who said that many times school leaders and teachers consider character education as something additional. More workshops, more trainings, for which they don't have enough time, overwhelmed by bureaucracy and administrations. But character is not something additional. It's essential. It's about why and how we do all the decisions and actions in the school. How we pass school administration, for bureaucracy, how we delegate their tasks, how we teach. It's in everything. So this is the essential thing. That's why we are very happy that Jasmina is going to discuss on possible strategies for increasing the effectiveness, cultivating Phronesis in teachers' education. The contribution is titled "The Teacher as Phronimos, Cultivating Phronesis in Teacher." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, for your wonderful introduction. And again, in terms of gratitude, I really want to express my deepest gratitude to be here, especially to Professor Reisky, and his invitation to be here, and to have the opportunity to discuss about Phronesis with you. I'm going to talk about Phronesis, and I'm not going to go in details in the concept of Phronesis because Professor Clifford has already explained it. And I'm going to speak about the importance of teacher as being a phonetic wise man or wise woman, as a pretty much important, that has a pretty much important role in education. I'm going to start with my presentation with one author that was relatively neglected considering Phronesis, but actually is the first proponent who considered Phronesis as a virtue of the humanities. And that was way back, rather in the 20th century, and that is Jean-Baptiste Vicot. I'm quoting him: "If you were to include the geometrical method into practical life, you would do no more than exhaust yourself in becoming a rational lunatic." He's concerned about young men's education and thinks that neither specialists in topic that fall into falsehood, nor philosophical criticism that disdain probabilities best fit their growth. Vicot is proposing teaching the totality of sciences and arts so they can grow in Phronesis and eloquence by imagination and memory. He is insisting in eloquence, but understood in broad sense, and draws strong connections with Phronesis, since both Phronesis and eloquence consider particulars and Aristotica universals, aspire to persuade, consider circumstance and precedents, address passions, and require ingenuity and sharp perception. A vast and excellent reflection and investigation has been done since Vicot's insights on Phronesis education, especially in the last 40 years. And the two general directions in which Phronesis in education is developed are towards educating Phronesis and the revival of Phronesis-inspired moral education theories, and towards cultivating professional wisdom in the framework of professional education. So, Phronesis is strongly embedded in the process of education that involves complex, context-sensitive deliberation. It is a practice that requires flexible and sensitive judgment in context-changing educational circumstances. The teacher should nurture receptivity to specific educational situations and problems, flexibility in their interpretation and solution, openness to new and unexpected situations, and ability to relevantly and creatively apply the general pedagogical knowledge. So phronesis in the complex educational ground is differently interpreted and can be related to, for example, first in my head, things that phonetics, having a phronesis is ability to give practical arguments. According to Sherman, it is some kind of ability to discriminate things, so it's discrimination. Schuschmann thinks it's discernment, very similar to Sherman. Dune think it's some kind of phonetic insight. Van Manen, it's pedagogical part. It can be noted here that the ancient Greek term krisis, that is usually translated as discernment and discrimination, has an important role in the educational exercise of phronesis, especially in the educational interplay of between particulars and universals. Also, is emphasized perception or practical perception in correlation with the metaphor of the vision and the eye, used in the works of Aristotle for description of phronesis. In most of the approaches, a slight tip over the particulars view can be observed, probably as a reaction of the dominant rule principle-based approaches. In my presentation today, I'm going to focus on an element that I consider is the fundamental one for phronesis development in the classroom, that of the moral education of the teacher. Seeing the teacher as Phronimos is the key element for a phonetic education in general. The teacher should not be taken as an external factor of the pupil's internal and external moral processes, but as a key factor for properly guiding and motivating pupils' own affinities by connecting them with their life context. I will examine first the possibilities for cultivating phronesis in teacher service education and analyze the curriculum support for this cultivation. But first of all, we need to face again with the Socratic dilemma from Menon. Can virtue be learned, especially in adult age? And as both questions, can higher education foster higher morals? Does higher education have capacity to enhance ethical sensibilities, and specifically in pedagogical faculties where professions are grounded in ethical dimensions? And finally, is it too late or too early for education students to learn virtue? I'm going to briefly turn into the dominant perspective regarding these many questions, namely the Neo-Kohlbergian and the Neo-Aristotelian interpretation. And luckily, in a Socratic manner, both perspectives are responding positively to this Socratic dilemma. So, in a Socratic manner, they're positively saying yes, there is a possibility to do. But now we're going to see how they're responding, in what ways this moral development should go towards too. In the Neo-Kohlbergian dominant perspective, in the post-conventional schema in which students are expected to be, the development is possible, and in terms of gaining consensus by appealing to ideas, ideas and logical coherence. This is very important. So post-conventional rights and responsibilities refers to shared ideals for organizing cooperation, such as majority rules that are shareable, negotiable, reciprocal, and open to scrutiny for others. And opposing to this perspective, according to Nash, pre-professionals and professionals alike resist moral classification, and regardless of personal experience, level of maturity, age, stage, or gender, students come at ethical problem solving in a variety of ways, both on and off developmental schedule. He thinks that background beliefs, social and psychological context, formal and informal training, and organizational norms are better predictions than stage or schema theory. The neo-Aristotelian perspective, on the other hand, is less formalized, less hierarchical, and less age-connected. The moral development is possible in adulthood years and is going through the years and experiences, but its enhancing dwells not only in the logical coherentism, but in the realm of character. There are different neo-Aristotelian approaches, and I will mention but two of the most recent. One is that of the Darnell et al. Paper, published several months ago. According to them, there are four components of Phronesis attainment: virtue identification, selection, and relevance that constitute the constitutive function, making action choices and their justification, that's the integrative function, building moral identity, that's the blueprint function, and empathy and perspective taking, that is the emotion regulation. And as opposed to the perspective of acquisition of inferior personal qualities, here present Reisky and Wittenberger, accentuate the relationality and the other as a key aspect for the constitution, acquisition, and realization of Phronesis. Young people arrive at the university with already formed beliefs, instincts, and sincere concern for each other. If there is left an open space for them to detect ethical issues more perceptively, to think about them more carefully, to understand more clearly the reasons for acting morally, it seems that this can make a change in their professional and personal behavior. Having undergraduate ethics education does not warrant developing full Phronesis, but it inevitably extends the previously nurtured moral experience and knowledge. It is not too late. Teachers get acquainted of their own character, beliefs, and values about themselves and as teachers, but also about the society and the world. According to the neo-Aristotelian perspective, there's no point where cultivation of Phronesis ends. On the contrary, the more we are exposed to life circumstances, especially the professional one, the more it is cultivated. But somebody would ask, is it too early? There are concerns that dealing, reflection, and understanding of the ethical issues should be embedded in educational practice. Moral disposition can be influenced, and in both formal, through curriculum, and informal way, through university activities and practices, and student engagements like participation in learning community, research participation, interaction with peers and faculty, writing essays, community service activities, and etc. It was shown that moral growth can change within a short period of time, such as university years, and that university experience is a powerful contributor towards that growth. University context brings many of the key elements for Phronesis cultivation. It is relatively, one of it is the relatively good amount of life experience and a capability to make conscious, deliberative nuances of the ethical situation. It is a good ground for qualitative shift from habitual virtue to Phronesis-inspired virtue and culmination of one's behavior in informed and phonetically directed practice. So how does undergraduate curriculum contribute to this possibility for cultivating Phronesis? It is not a novice that there is strong conceptual support for enhancing teachers' training curriculum for ethical education. However, besides this strong support, it can be shown that pre-service teacher education does not contribute adequately to enhancing the ethical sensibility of future teachers. Even the literature considering character education for teachers, the discussion and terminology often resemble the standard scientific path. Surprisingly, and sincerely for me devastating, there is constantly found lower levels of moral growth demonstrated by education students and future teachers. There is no improvement of education's moral reasoning scores from freshman to senior years, and moral reasoning scores of seniors in education have been found to be more like those of college freshmen and other programs. Comments at all suggest two reasons for this. The first, characteristic of the students themselves, as they choose their program as less difficult compared to others. And the second, factors related to the content of the teacher education curriculum. And I will focus on this. Other undergraduate students with majors other than education do experience such growth over their college career. This is backed up by a number of researchers that suggested that factors inherent in the educational curriculum may account for the deficiency in moral growth of education students. Teacher education programs often fail to integrate awareness of and discussions about ethical issues in teaching. Consequently, teachers who graduate from such programs may not be able to reason about and to respond to many moral and ethical issues that arise daily in the context of the dynamic classroom. One of the radical implications is that teacher education students may become teachers whose moral judgment is no higher than that of their students. These programs tend to emphasize courses that are skills and methods oriented and devoted to technical competence at the expense of courses that incorporate moral abstract content. For example, courses like philosophy, sociology, pedagogical psychology, logic, and ethics in education are elective courses in the curriculum at the Faculty of Philosophy. According to Campbell, there is practical negligence in the undergraduate teachers program, and wherever this aspect is not neglected, it is not contributing adequately, especially in terms of applying it in the individually accountable practices. Engagement in work related to the ethics of teaching, according to her, tends to be vague, indirect, and uncertain in tone. In the words of the participants in her research, even if an ethical issue occasionally did come up, it never seemed planned and was often in reaction to a student-initiated question. There was consensus about all participants that they were not overly certain as to which component of the program were ethically related, especially insofar as the connection to the daily practice is concerned. And should the text three broad thematic areas in the so-called implicit, not explicit, implicit ethics curriculum, standards and laws, social justice education, and negative modeling from the field. So, what consists dominantly the explicit teacher ethical education curriculum? The topics that are dominantly absorbed in the curriculum are usually the do's and don'ts in the educational practice. But Stephen is allowing the opposite, a never freeze at particular do's and don'ts. This specious moralism that is nurtured in the professional ethics usually brings about oversimplistic moral formulas, rules and codes that should be practiced in the professional practice. As opposed to this technical narrative arises the Phronesis narrative, which emphasizes the emotional practice of education and the emotion in the educational discourse, where the cultivation of teachers' personal qualities and character are required, as opposed to the exclusively impersonal and disinterested approaches. According to the Phronesis narrative, the educational practice does not represent a technology of pedagogy based on behavioral science of learning, nor it is a procedure subject to experimentation and observation that is standardized and measurable. Comments et al. Suggest that education students' lower moral growth based on the possibility of alleviation poverty of the courses they attend, which prepare them to become educational technicians. They have to be challenged with content-rich ideas and theories in order to recognize the importance of morality. Thus, having in mind this tendency, the insistence on ethical education and other core humanities courses in educational curriculum for educators, both as separate courses and throughout the curriculum in an explicit and not implicit way, is rising. Enhancing moral sensitivity, moral judgment, and moral motivation and moral character can be more effective in curriculums that has more liberal arts focus. However, only stacking the curriculum with various humanities courses is not the solution. For a proper Phronesis infusion, Both moral perspective and practical problem solving should be included. The teacher education curriculums have nor simply to teach particular codes and rules of professionalism, neither abstract version of theories, but also to demonstrate vividly how moral judgment and sensitivity are played out in the actual details of practice, and ideally to sparkle wonder, including both cognitive and emotive and cognitive element, like reflection, analysis, the justification, and intuition, feeling, intention, communities, personal narratives, and language. The two-way illumination between particular and universal, that is the ideal of Phronesis, in educational and teaching context has its own specific challenges. Universals like various theories of the goals of the education and teaching, curriculum goals and contents, teaching methods, school and classroom rules, lesson planning, etc., should be connected with particulars like particular teacher with his or her own teaching and personal specificities, particular students that come from various particular socioeconomic, cultural, religious, political, intellectual, emotional contexts in particular school and this particular classroom. And having in mind all of these variables and unvariables, one can get the impression that educational context is an unhospitable ground for developing Phronesis. However, the same applies to life. Referring to Nussbaum and her reflection on conditions of human life, Jo discussed the educational challenges in the framework of the concepts uncertainty, vulnerability, and particularity as conditions of the educational and especially of teachers' life. Life, as well as classrooms, are changeable and uncertain. The risk of loss and the danger of conflict in the educational world of perishable objects and relationships makes us vulnerable. Our human life lays always in the particularities and it is historically and contextually embedded. According to her, it is of ethical relevance how everyone in the educational context, especially the teacher, is reacting to this uncertainty, vulnerability, and particularity, because it is precisely where Phronesis arises. Precisely on this aspect should be put in focus on ethical education of teacher that presupposes a broader humanistic education. As Jean-Baptiste Bicot and afterwards Gadamer have pointed out, Phronesis is the virtue of humanities, and education which has strong ethical mission has to be necessarily brought back at the humanities ground. There must be a strong moral component emphasized in teacher education, because education itself is a moral act and teaching is an ethical practice that should lead to Phronesis. But for me, a final question emerges here, whose answer will have, at least in my opinion, an essential role for our future Phronesis investigation in education and in general. What is the place of professional Phronesis that relates to the specific educational practice or specific practice in social work, law, etc., within the universe of Phronesis? To make a point, I will make short digression here. My primary academic interest, research, is not Phronesis in education, but searching for definition of Phronesis in the vast tradition of history and philosophy. And in this relatively short research, I can see that Phronesis has been reread, revisited, and reconceptualized within every philosophical paradigm and era, and has always retained its basic conceptual presuppositions, but also has been flavored with the local and temporal spices. Our contemporary Phronesis has its own specificities also. In the 20th century, Phronesis became a symbol for the postmodern critique of the Enlightenment abstract mind. According to Heidegger, it is the other kind of knowledge, a concept he uses in favor of his critique of the Western interest for the concept of being and the existence of the idea of positioning a man in the world. In general, Phronesis is taken to symbolize the turn from the transcendental scientific mind to practical, empirically based thought. But the Phronesis of the 21st century has deepened this practicality and empiricality, strongly reflecting our deep devotion to separation, partition, and specialization. And this can be testified in the various professional concepts of phronesis. So we can see that there is educational phronesis, medical phronesis, social work phronesis, business and management phronesis, law phronesis, there's even a police phronesis. This particular and I would say techne-motivated phronesis go way beyond the Aristotelian concept and are theoretically justified by, as Christiansen calls it, a reconstructivist narrative, as opposed to the exegetical one. I agree that the new contexts require new interpretation, but this tendency of partitioning phronesis seriously declines from the core sets of principles that constitute the concept of phronesis. And in this manner, I want to conclude. The professional morality should be derived from the general moral identity and character that should be afterwards molded through the specificities of professional educational context. Without cultivating general moral identity and character, we are faced with the possibility of nurturing rational educational lunatic, as Vico has alarmed, but I would add a narrow-minded one also. This again shows the complex, circular, and interrelated connections of all educational factors and stages, which bring us back again to the importance of early phronesis development, which includes those of the future teachers. Thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you very much. I have a page of notes, but I don't want to occupy this place with my own ideas and thoughts because we are short in time and we have only 45 minutes for a panel discussion. To the original plan to have 60 minutes. However, I hope you have prepared your questions.